what was your job title on April 20th, 2010?
It was the same title, drilling engineer in New Orleans District.
And now let's move on to what you do now. Could you give me an overview of what your job duties were on April 20th, 2010? Let's use that date as the benchmark.
Okay, my main duties were, and are right now, review applications for permits to drill new wells, sidetracks, and bypasses, to review revisions to those permits, to review completions of the wells if they're going to be completed, or abandonments if they're going to be abandoned. Those are my main duties, and also I review well activity reports and end of operation reports from time to time.
Let's go back to reviewing the applications that are submitted. Okay. You carefully review these applications, correct?
I try to, yes.
Because you want to make sure that everything is in accordance with the regulations?
That is correct.
And that everything is capable of being used at the depths they want to use it, and that the well is being designed safely?
Yes.
And you carefully review it because you want to make sure that the casing program, the cementing program, and the drilling program in general is safe and sufficient to drill a successful and safe well.
Those are parts of my review, yes.
Okay. And in this instance, all of the applications that were submitted by BP were in fact approved, correct?
Yes.
And you agree that all the APDs that were approved by the MMS met the minimum requirements of the regulations?
To the best of my review, it appeared to me that yes is the answer to that.
You wouldn't approve a document that required MMS approval unless you were satisfied with all of the information contained within the document.
Right. As far as our review goes, if we thought that it was correct and complete, we would approve it.
And if you thought it was correct and complete and consistent with the regulations, you would approve it?
Yes.
And the MMS internal policy for drilling margin is you should have a 0.5 point per gallon window between the formation integrity test result and the mud weight.
That is correct.
Okay. And it's not actually between the fracture gradient and the mud weight?
No, okay. Not the fracture gradient. It's with the above casings. The last casing shoe was actually tested too.
Let's talk about mud weight for a second. Why is that included in the weekly activity report?
The mud weight is important in keeping the well under control when you are drilling it so you do not have the blowout.
Okay, and so they give you a mud weight value in the weekly activity report. Do you compare it to anything? Do you check it against anything? What specifically about the mud weight is important to you?
Well, we compare it against the predicted pore pressure and against the latest shoe test that was taken on the last string of casing that was set.
Are you aware that that BP received oral approval to drill within a 0.3 margin on multiple occasions at the MC252 number 1 well?
I believe I've read emails in the last few days that have shown that, yes.
Are you aware that BP sought and obtained oral approval to drill with a 0.3 margin on March 18th, 2010?
I can't recall, but as you say, if you have those documents and they show that, then I would take your word for it.
Third page is labeled temporary abandonment procedure for the Macondo well,
yes.
Correct?
Correct.
And was this a procedure for temporary abandonment of the well that BP submitted to you for approval?
Yes.
Did you approve this procedure?
Yes, I did.
And you reviewed the procedure?
Yes, I did.
There are no CFR regulations that govern or control a negative pressure test, right?
That is correct.
And there's no MMS guideline or policy at the time of the incident that governs or controls a negative pressure test.
That is correct.
And in fact, a negative pressure test is not even required under MMS regulations.
At the time of the incident, that is correct.
Do you do any work during the APD process regarding analysis of the blowout preventer or the sufficiency of the blowout preventer? What do you do that relates to the blowout preventer?
In our review of the application, of course, one thing we look at is to see if they have the required number of different types of preventers needed to safely to drill the well and all. And also we review the test pressure, the ratings of the blowout preventers, the rams, the annulars, the shears, to ensure that they're of a high enough, rated to a high enough pressure that they will be able to contain any pressures that will be encountered in the well.
Okay. Where do you get the data about the BOP, the particular BOP that's being used to make that analysis?
That is supplied in the application.
Now, there are different ways of calculating MASP, are there not?
I believe there are variations. Yes, there are, yes.
Is there a preferred, does MMS prefer any one method over another?
No, there are two methods that are calculated in our e-well system from the data that, the raw data that is supplied by the operator.
Now, this data is supplied by the operator, correct? The data we're looking at right here.
That is correct.
Is this data checked by MMS?
Not on this sheet per se. We may spot check it with the information on those other pages we reviewed as to all the casing information and the intervals.
Okay, do you know whether or not, in this particular case, for this APD, MMS did any type of independent analysis of maximum anticipated surface pressure values?
The e-well system does that evaluation. And if it's okay, it shows up in blue. If we see a problem with it, it'll show up in red.
Okay. How does the e-well system do that calculation?
It's based on calculation on formulas that MMS at the time used for evaluating casing and well design.
Is there any preferred method of calculating MASP?
As I said, in our e-well system, we have the formulas that MMS uses to calculate MASP. And that is what we rely on for our evaluation.
At the time, if a BOP had two annulars, and one of those annulars met the minimum pressure requirements, you would have allowed that BOP to continue operations, correct?
Yes.
And you were aware of the fact that the lower annular was a 5K annular and the MASP was in excess of 5K when you approved this application, correct?
I would assume I did from reviewing this.
And in fact, you reviewed and approved all of BP's applications for permits, correct?
I believe that, yes.
And at the time, you thought you had all the information necessary to approve those permits?
That was the assumption I made, yes.
And if any information had been missing, you would have rejected those APDs?
If I had caught the missing information, that is correct. I would
Okay.
return the APDs for corrections.
You would have sought further information from BP?
Yes.
Are you aware of any incidents of noncompliance related to the Deepwater Horizon rig?
No, I'm not.
Ever had any, I'm talking about before April 20th, 2010, ever had any particular problems with BP?
No problems. I'm sure when I reviewed your applications, there were things that needed to be changed like every other application.